you ever gone on a work or business trip to such a good location that it would have been just like so stupid to not extend it a few more days? I have one of those going on really soon, actually. An awesome couple from this church asked me if I would officiate their wedding in Hawaii. I actually said, yeah, I know. I actually said no at first. I don't think I can afford that. And they're like, well, we're going to actually help you get there. And I was like, yes, sign me up for that. But then we had another dilemma. You see, I have a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 9-month-old. And my wife and I were like, should we bring the kids? What do you think? No. It took a little finagling, but we're dropping the kids off tonight at the grandparents' house and flying out a couple days later. Yes, thank you very much. Very excited about that. Very excited. It's going to be so good for us. Anyways, one of the things that that came up in the planning of this trip was, we thought we should write a will. 3 kids, need to make sure that stuff is planned. And so a friend of ours is a lawyer who recommended us to another lawyer that specializes in this stuff. So we sit down with a lawyer, and she's telling us about a will and a trust and learning all the lingo, right, the legal jargon. Because our kids, are just like your kids. They fight over the last Cheerio on the bottom of the bag. They fight over everything. And who knows what kind of fighting would happen over who's going to get the car or whatever else. So we need to figure this stuff out, right? And as you start thinking about this stuff, you begin to reflect on what you're leaving behind. And because families can easily get torn apart over this kind of stuff, over who the inheritance is going to go to and how it's going to be distributed. The heart of envy can really come out in moments like these, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. The Bible gives 3 metaphors about your life. It says that your life is like a mist. It says that your life is like breath. So I want you to go to the person next to you and go, breath. No, I don't. Don't do that. Your life is like the grass of the field, like a flower of a field. What do these 3 things have in common? They all have a short lifespan. The Bible wants you to understand that your life, our life here on this planet, is a short time. But the Bible also wants you to understand that you were made in the image of God. And part of what that means is that every single one of us had a beginning point to our existence. But that our existence, our spirit, will live and go on for all of eternity. And when you get to the end of your life, whenever that may be, and you begin to reflect on what really matters, what really mattered to your short time here on earth, in light of eternity, what's it going to be? When I first gave my life to Christ about 14 years ago as a young 19-year-old dude, and I started listening to some Christian rock music. It was cool. GS Megaphone was one of those bands, and some of the words from one of the songs meant a lot to me, and I've had them memorized for all these years. It goes like this: I'm going to live my life like I was 70 yesterday, and God let me go back to relive all my younger days. One thing's for sure this time I'm not going to do. I'm not going to wait until my life is half spent before I live my life for you. If you could go back and do it all again, what would you do differently? What matters to God? What matters to God that we can see reflected in the life of Jesus? Today we're going to talk about an inner attitude of our heart that's focused on a heart of generosity and how this is part of the answer to that question. My name is Jesse. I'm one of the pastors here at Grace. So pumped to be with you all today. Online campus, what up, yo? From wherever you're joining us. We love you guys. Wish you were here, but it's all good. If you need a Bible, the usher's going to be coming forward. Raise your hand. They'll hook you up. We're going to be going through Scripture because we love the Bible. We believe that God speaks to us. It's where He authoritatively speaks to us. So if you don't have a Bible, it's our gift to you. Keep it. I want you to have one. We're going to Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Luke 12, 13, page 566 in the House Bible. Little kids know how to interrupt moments. Did you hear that one that was crying down the road? That was mine. They know how to interrupt moments. And I love my kids to pieces. I could just squeeze them and, kiss them. But like moments, for example, like I'm in the shower, just minding my own business, enjoying, just trying to wake up or whatever. And then all of a sudden, shower door swings open and Bennett's like, hi. Hi, Bennett. All right, jump in the shower with me, whatever. Or, sitting around the dinner table, just trying to enjoy a simple dinner in peace and quiet. And then, our 3-year-old, all of a sudden spills the milk because we forgot to put a top on it, which is fine. But then our 9-month-old throws food, off the plate. And then our 2-year-old just starts crying for whatever reason. And it's like, they just know how to interrupt moments, right? It's sometimes the most, those moments you've been waiting a long time for. You interrupt those moments too. You know what I'm talking about. Lord, grow them up quick. Jesus is teaching a crowd of, it says, so many thousands of people that can't even be counted. And he's teaching all kinds of important things, like if you stand for God on that day, God will stand for you on that day of judgment. I mean, these really important things that people get. And then all of a sudden, this guy kind of bursts onto the scenes and interrupts Jesus' teaching and says this. He says to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus, all this stuff about standing for God, that's cool and all. But I have a real issue going on here. I need you to help me with it. His brother is most likely standing right there with him in the crowd. And we begin to see that the inner attitude of this man is laser focused on his inheritance, right? That's what he really is looking for. And he probably has a very solid case of why his brother owes him his share of the inheritance. And he recognizes that Jesus has clout. Jesus has authority. That's why all these thousands of people are coming around. And so he's seizing this opportunity to say, hey, if Jesus tells him to give it to me, I bet he's going to give it to me. But Jesus doesn't give him what he wants. Instead, he asks him to consider reframing the way that he's thinking about what's important in life. Don't you hate it when Jesus does that? You're like, God, I just want you to give me this one thing, make this work out for me. And he's like, actually, I want you to think differently about what you're going through in life and what really you need and what's important in this situation. And so Jesus responds to him and said to him, man, who made me judge or arbitrator over you? You see, Jesus knew his purpose. He knew where to put his energy. And it wasn't into stuff like this. His mission was to reveal the good news of God, the love of God to the world. Through word and deed, the good news, the gospel. And not only that, he was all about inviting people to bring anyone who is willing along with him, to train them, to teach them, to go and do likewise after his short life on earth was about to end. But before we get there, we need to know the teachings and we need to trust the way. And so Jesus teaches us. He says, take care and be on your guard against all kinds of covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Jesus is attempting to speak into the heart of this man with truth and grace. Yes, directly and some kind of bluntly, but trying to help him think differently. That if he continues to focus on the things of the possessions of this world, the inheritance that he thinks he wants, that if that's the focus of his life, he will never really have life. Do you know a story of a family that was just tattered, destroyed, torn apart over the focused attention on an inheritance or money or those things? Greed and those things can so break up a family with rivalry. What does Luke mean by one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions? I believe that this concept of one's life is the good life. This is the good stuff right here. It's not just life today, and it's not just life in eternity, but it's this kind of life that begins the moment we say yes to these teachings and trust them and live into them, that gives us that we see real value that goes for all of eternity, begins to take fruit in our life. Real meaning, peace from anxiety. That's captured in the rest of chapter 12. If we had time to go there, we don't. But that starts today and spills into all of eternity. The one who sees life purpose consisting in the abundance of his or her possessions, the accumulation and the consumption of goods and resources. I was an economics major. If that's what your life is all about, you will find that you will not actually have real life. I never forget, I really studied this passage in 2004 in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia as a going into my senior year in college at UCSD, and I was working in an orphanage and teaching these Ethiopian kids English, and it was awesome. But I was surrounded by abject poverty that's so bad that even if you want to try and get out of it, there's not the resources available for you to get out of it, which is different than here. Shantytown and slum just as far as the eye can see. And I ate Injera and Durawat for 6 weeks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Anybody know what Injera is? You know what it is. It's an acquired taste. I had to learn to love it. And one of the reason that they had us do that for 6 weeks was the identification with the urban poor. It was part of the core value of this trip this mission trip I went on. Why? Why did they want me as a UCSD economics student, a great institution, begin to identify with the urban poor? Because as you begin to walk in the shoes of another person, living like another, it begins to test you. As you begin to learn the story of another person, it begins to show you what's in your heart. And if I was honest with you, what was in my heart at that point was economics major, finish, go to get my MBA, and then the unspoken goal was the abundance of possessions, that's where real good life was. But I knew that I was beginning to get a sense of Christ. I knew that there was something more and deeper, and that in order to get it, I needed to take some action. And so I went to Africa 4 times, and I went to different places in Peru and Mexico, and I knew that it wasn't just going to happen to me. I had to take some action for something to shift in my heart, for the values to begin to become the values of the kingdom of God, what really matters in life. Jesus loved to teach in parables, and we're going to look at a parable right here. It says, "And he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I now have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all of my grains and my goods." Now, what's a parable? Remember back in elementary school, or maybe if you're a little slower like myself, middle school or high school, learning kind of like, algebra and squared things. And what happens on a graph is this. You get a parabola, right? This symmetrical U-shaped curve. And a parable is similar to a parabola. You see, there's a story that's going to be told, a very simple one, with a truth coming alongside that story, buried inside that story. And if you choose to seek after the truth, you will find it. What's the purpose of Jesus teaching in parables? Part of the purpose is so that, because everyone's going to see, but not everybody's going to understand. Everyone is going to hear, but not everyone is going to really perceive or understand. I forget what I said earlier. The real deeper meaning, the reality of the kingdom of God. For some people, this is just going to be farming. What's the difference? A pursuit, a hunger, a drive in each person, a seeking after in order to find. It takes faith and action. Otherwise, you may not find it. I want to break down this story because we got to get to know the story before we can find the truth. So we got a farmer who has barns that are full. And the projections are looking good for the next season. So he thinks quickly. He's forward thinking. He has practical plans, takes decisive action to tear down his barns and build bigger ones. That is an awesome plan. He's not making wealth out of, dishonest means. And if you look at some of the other parables, the parable of the talents and the shrewd manager and other teachings of Jesus, it's important that we use our resources and not waste them, but build them. So far, the story's going really well, but here's the key. It's the inner attitude of our hearts as we build. Because this brother is about to go south. Check it out. "And I will say to my soul," this is what he says to himself, "Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? Jesus gives us a glimpse into the inner workings of this hypothetical person to help us understand what not to have. Thinks that his work on earth is done. He thinks he's accomplished what he was put on this planet for. And he's deceived. There's two ways to look at life. Number one, two ways. The self-made person. And I don't know why the self-made person has big muscles. That just came to my mind, and so he's got muscles. The self-made person with muscles has three inner attitudes. Number one, what I have is from me. If you read back through that parable that I just read, you will find 15 personal pronouns. What will I tell? What will I do with my resources? What I will say to myself over and over and over again. The inner attitude of a self-made person is this: what I have, I've worked hard for. What I have, I've earned. I deserve what I have. What I have is mine. The second inner attitude is this: I control my future. It's interesting if you look at the contrast. He says to himself, all of these abundant possessions, I will basically use them for many years to come. And then God comes in and says, fool, this very night, tonight, your soul is required of you. I wonder if he knew that his life was going to end before he could enjoy what he accumulated. If he would have gone back and done things differently. If he wouldn't have been focused on trying to build bigger barns for the sake of accumulation and consumption. I got point 2 and 3 confused. That's okay. Do you really have control over your destiny? Do you know what tomorrow holds? Is tomorrow promised for you? It's not. The second attitude is that I control my future. When in reality, we don't know what tomorrow holds, do we? Absolutely, we have security in Christ. We know where our eternal destiny goes. And there are promises that you can bank your life on that come from God. But tomorrow is not promised. The third attitude, which I confuse with point 2, is I determine what's valuable. I am the holder of what is truly valuable. It's interesting. The final question posed is, the things you have prepared, whose will they be? Right? That's how it ends. You know, all those big barns that you've created and accumulated, what are you going to do with them now? What good are they to you now? The reality is you can't take that stuff with you. I wonder if he would have done things differently, if he would have focused on different things. What kind of value should we really place on temporal things? These attitudes, according to Christ, are foolishness. I want to contrast these attitudes to the Christ-centered person. I don't know, it's not super creative. I should have come up with something more creative, but the Christ-centered person, whatever. And to get the first 2 points of this, I want us to look at Deuteronomy chapter 8. It's an awesome passage. It's been meaningful for me in my life for many years. Israel has just wandered for 40 years, the people of Israel, in incredible scarcity. Can you imagine trying to raise a family wandering in the desert, not knowing where your food's going to come tomorrow? That would be rough. And they're about to step into a whole new way of living. And God is really committed to them having the proper inner attitude as they step into it. Let me read it for you. Deuteronomy 8:11. Take care lest you forget. We forget quickly, don't we? The Lord your God, by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today, lest when you have eaten and are full, they're like, I can't wait to eat something other than manna. If you don't know what that is, that's a different lesson. And have built good houses and live in them. And when your herds and your flocks, they multiply, and your silver and your gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied. Then your heart will be lifted up. It will be puffed up with pride. And you will forget the Lord your God, who, number one, brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of slavery. Who, number two, led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water. who, number 3, brought you water out of the flinty rock, who, number 4, fed you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers did not know. And here's the purpose, that he might humble you and test you to do good in the end. Beware lest you say in your heart, the inner attitude, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the power to get wealth. This passage is awesome to give us proper perspective on how to understand possessions in light of God. The first attitude of the Christ-centered person who doesn't have any muscles, I don't know why. He's got muscles, he's just not flexing because he's humble and he's got a really big heart. The first attitude is this: what I have is a gift from God. You see, I numbered off as I read that God brought them out of slavery. God led them all those years, that God provided for them the food and the water in the midst of scarcity, what they need. I mean, think about the air that we breathe. We don't have control over that. What's that movie? Anyways, think about the mind that you were given to think critically, to think rationally about things. You were given your brain. Think about the natural resources here in the United States to be able to produce all the wonderful things that we have. Think about just being born here in the United States. If you watch the news, I mean, it breaks my heart to think about the 300 young girls, the schoolgirls that were taken in Nigeria by Boko Haram. I mean, they didn't choose that for themselves. If we choose to have the perspective that what we have is a gift from God, that is the beginning point. The second attitude of a Christ-centered person is that God can protect what I have. He does protect what I have. 40 years in scarcity before the promised land to humble them and to test them. If you choose to take on this mission of God, there's going to be some humbling and some testing, but there's purpose behind it so that there will be good for you in the end. You know, your possessions will come and go. They will, won't they? There's no promise about your job for tomorrow or how the economy is going to do. Our possessions are not secure. And really, God's ultimately not concerned about our possessions. He's concerned about developing our hearts to be like his. And so God will protect what he promised, that he will lead you. He will be with you. He will provide the things that you really need. And guess what? I want to learn these lessons as soon as possible. You don't want to know why? Because I want to get out of the desert and into the promised land like sooner than later, right? And so I want to get this stuff so that God can move us along, and so that I don't forget, but I remember who it comes from, so that I use what I have. And it won't just happen to us. We need to take action. I want to go back to the end of this parable in verse 21. It says, this is how Jesus finishes. So is the one who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God. What do you think it means to be rich towards God? We talk a lot about getting riches from God, and that's absolutely true, this amazing inheritance that we get from God. But this is different. What does it mean to be rich towards God? The third attitude is that what I have is available to others. The starting point of understanding what it means to be rich towards God is to understand how the Son was rich and generous towards his Father. I want to talk a little bit about Jesus and how he was generous with his life. Number one, the Son of God, before he took on a body, the Son of God never had a beginning point like we did. He's always existed because he's God. And that all things were created through him. And that God, the Son of God, decided to come down to earth, the incarnation, to take on flesh, to move into our neighborhood amidst the rivalry and the lying and the brokenness and the selfishness. He came in the midst of that. That is, if you think about God, that's an incredibly act of generosity of God. But not only did he come, but he lived and showed us how to live a generous life. Do you know that Jesus defended and embraced children? Did you know that about Jesus? If you read through, you'll get to know that. Did you know that, according to James 1, that you want to know what religion is? Caring for widows and orphans. Did you know that Jesus, number 2, taught that the pain of sin and the believing lies, but showed us the way out of it through truth? Did you know that, number 3, Jesus was interruptible? He would stop his mission, even though this was part of his mission, and would be interruptible to people that are around him that were hurting, were suffering, and would heal them. Did you know, number 4, that he fed the hungry, multitudes of people on many occasions? Did you know, number 5, that he was intentional to elevate ethnically suppressed people? And I don't just say this because it's like politically correct right now in the news, right? 2,000 years ago, if you study the life of Jesus, if you look at John chapter 4, the woman at the well, look at the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan. All over, you will see the raising, the lifting up of people that were suppressed. Number 6, he was a voice to those who didn't have one. Number 7, he invited people to take on the mission that he was embarking on. He lived an incredible, generous life. And number 3, he died a death and rose from the dead so that we could be reconciled to God for all of eternity. I mean, an incredibly generous life. Our generosity and richness towards God flows out of what we see valuable and important to Jesus, and we go and do likewise. If you don't know how Christ was generous, read through the Gospels. Seriously, it won't take you that long, I promise. With that question in mind, how were you generous, Jesus? I want to get practical a little bit. How can we, what I call mobilize hope, how can we put some traction to this to be rich towards God? Let it flow through our lives. Like I have this chart thing. There's no silver bullet, but I want to give you some options. Number 1, hygiene products. If you look in your program, you will see a little card that looks like that. It tells you what to bring and what not to bring. Next week, if you are here, I will not be here. I'm going to get my luau on. But if you are here, we want you to bring hygiene products. And during the service, we're going to ask you to come forward and bring them forward and just lay them down. And then Project Reach, throughout the next weeks and months to come, are going to distribute not only food to thousands of families in this neighborhood, but hygiene products as well. According to Scott, that's what they need. Maybe that's your step towards taking action. Maybe you want to take it a step further, and you want to join Project Reach and help give that stuff out. Maybe you want to take it even a step further. This is at the church, people. This is what we do. Maybe Project Reach isn't just about meeting needs, immediate needs, but the long-term development of families and individuals. And so maybe you have a skill that you can teach, a computer training skill or a parenting skill or a job placement skill or a social worker or whatever. What else can be taught to the neighborhood right here? Maybe you can do that. In about 5 minutes, we're going to be taking a special offering for the Thailand team that we're sending from this church. I went a number of years ago with this church and Project Reach, and let me read for you first the mission of Compassio, the organization we work with. Protecting and empowering the most vulnerable on the Burmese-Thai border. This picture is a picture in Mae Sot, the Mae Sot dump. And I just held on to this kid as long as I could. You see that behind me? That's the dump. And a whole community of Burmese refugees live right there. And if you look to the right, here's the picture of our team, but if you look to the right, there's the Grace Home. A number of years ago, we sent $10,000 to Compassio to buy a house that is now filled with Burmese young kids that don't have parents. And so if you can give to that offering that we're about to take, it's going to support the team. So that's the Thailand team going in fall, but we also have a team going to Haiti in the fall. Thailand's full, but Haiti is open. We need 12 more spots. Maybe you want to take that step of action. Let me read you the vision of Child Hope, what we work with there. Seeks to rescue and care for impoverished children and orphans in order to equip them to, That's not it. Equip them to be the next generation of disciples for Christ, prepared to impact the world for him. And if you get to know some of the high school students that they are developing, they're the real deal. They are leaders in their community. It's awesome. One of the best community development organizations I've ever seen. I've seen a good amount. Maybe you want to go to Haiti. Find the guy that's got he's the old guy with the messed up face that comes up here every once in a while and does announcements. It's a joke. I don't do it if you want to go to Haiti or whatever. We got some groups at Grace that are mobilizing hope. There's a group, one of our Connect groups. It's called the Make a Meal Ministry, led by Andrea Immel, and a group of ladies get together once a month, and they cook food in the cottage, and then they put it in these metal containers, and they freeze them. And throughout the month, people from the leaders of this church go, and when we hear of a need, we bring the meal to them. Let me share with you two this last week. It's a preschool family from our own preschool. Husband's deployed, mom is getting surgery or got surgery, one of the two, and has two little kids. Someone from this church, one of our staff, went and brought a meal to that family, to that mom. Vern Bridgman, I don't know if you know him, but he's been here forever. He's 90 and is in the hospital. And this group of ladies from the church went and brought him that meal and cleaned up his house and did awesome stuff. We currently don't have an organized team that's ready to respond to go do things like that. Maybe you want to lead that. Come talk to me. We got the Second Saturday Serve crew. They get stuff done here at Grace to make the community know that we want this place to be awesome, this facility, to welcome people. We care about this place. What else can be done? I love meeting with people. I'll meet with you if you have marriage counseling issues, cool. Yes, let's do that. But I love to meet with people to start visioning about how we can see the kingdom advance from this church. If you want to meet, let's figure that out. My goal is not to make anyone feel bad. If you can't go to Haiti, if you can't give to the Thailand team, I don't want you to feel bad. Maybe you are landlocked at home because of a newborn or a 2-year-old or whatever it is, you just can't get involved. I want to read to you a post from an awesome family from this church, and they are super generous with their life, and they're doing awesome stuff, but I love this post. For those of you who don't have kids and enjoy judging the behavior of children who aren't your own, I'd like you to understand something. She's a little fiery, so prime the pump. This morning, I would not let my daughter who had have fruit snacks for breakfast. And what ensued was a monumental breakdown. Think of a crack addict who isn't getting her crack. Complete loss of bodily function, limbs flailing, crying, shaking, wailing, scratching at the walls. It was ugly. This meltdown continued all the way to the market where we needed to pick up 2 things for a friend, a quick trip, and she melted down the entire time. I ignored her and carried on because guess what? Life goes on. Even when your 20-month-old completely loses her cool in a public location. I'm a tough mom. I'm an aware mom. I do not allow this behavior in my home. But my daughter doesn't understand at 20 months why we don't eat certain things for breakfast. And instead of giving in to her every whim, I deal with the meltdowns in order to teach her boundaries. The next time you see a young child losing it in the market or any other public place, remember this. Maybe his mommy or daddy just said no to fruit snacks for breakfast. Capiche? Isn't she awesome? Whatever, if you're in a place in life where you can't do some of these things, that's okay. But what does it look like for you to have a generous temperament, impulse, inner disposition, and figuring out practical, real ways to begin to do that? Whether big or small, it won't just happen to you. You need to begin to take action to develop this inner kind of heart that flows out of the richness that God has given to us. Let's bow our heads and pray.